Good evening, cake flickers. Nice to see you again. It's Zoe here from Sugar Art by Zoe Byres here in Brisbane. Tonight I am bringing you my third episode of Sugar Coated, and I'm so excited about this one. I'm really excited that first of all you've tuned in, so thank you very much for your support. Thanks to Paul and David and of course all the amazing Cake Flicks TV crew. Thank you so much. How exciting. We've got a little bit of stuff still going on in the world, so it's really nice to be able to tune out and to learn some new skills and to touch base and connect with people from all over the world. So it's been an absolute pleasure thus far, and I'm excited that you're here to join me along on this journey once more. All right, so tonight we are going to paint some cocoa butter portraits. So this is probably one of the favorite things I love to do. For whatever reason, people like to eat their face on a cake. It is a really nice little trick to get a nice personal feel to a cake. Much nicer than just printing out an edible image and finding a photo and doing all of that. If you can manage to get a likeness, it doesn't need to be photographic quality. Someone to just see a likeness of themselves on a cake, it makes it pretty special. So this is a process that you can use on cookies, you can use it on cakes, you can make plaques to put onto cakes, any number of things you can do. So in, I think, my first episode, I showed you how to paint a little bunny rabbit, and that was a quick paint with rose spirit. Tonight we're using cocoa butter. You could, however, set it up exactly the same way as that little bunny rabbit, and you could absolutely set it onto the side of a dummy as a thin piece of fondant, and that way you can attach it to a cake later on. So if you're concerned about painting directly onto a cake, don't be. You don't have to. You can absolutely make some pieces of fondant and then paint onto those and then pop them on your cakes later on. I should disclose to you that I have had a fight with a Pokemon ball, an airbrushed one this afternoon. So although it looks like I have committed some sort of, something that you might see on Netflix in a few months, that's not the case. I've just had a fight with a Pokemon ball. I came off second best, and this is the result. So I apologise profusely for my horrendous stained hands, but this is what we're dealing with as cake decorators. I'm sure you can all relate, but my apologies for that. They are clean, all the same. All right, so let's get started. So make sure it's a good quality image, and I'm not just talking, making sure that your subject matter is rather handsome. I'm saying that you need to make sure that you have got an image where you can see all your details and you can see all of your shading. This one is not the clearest that I have. I have blown this up and stolen this off the boys' website. Thanks very much for that, guys. But I am going to roll with this today. I can see enough detail in here to get these gorgeous faces onto my cake board. So what I have done is I have blown this up to the size that I want. Now I'm operating today on I keep knocking that camera, a 10-inch cake board. So that's what I'm painting on today. So these faces are going to fill up that board beautifully. Now what do? We've got the image. What we need to do is we need to mirror image it. So instead of printing it out this way, what we wanted to do is actually invert the image. So what I have done is I've gone to my local print shop here, and I've actually printed this out in reverse. So these blokes are still recognisable. We can still recognise who they are, but their faces are just that little bit different, and that's just because they've mirror imaged. So if we were to just transfer from this image straight onto the cake, you would end up with this sort of image, and it would be reversed. It would just not quite be right. So what I've got here is I've just got an everyday piece of baking paper. What I also like to do is use tracing paper if I have it, or if you can get your hands on these. Now these are pre-cut parchment papers, and these are really great if you're transferring to the top of your cake. Because they're already pre-cut, it tells you exactly where your image sits, and because you can see through it, I hope you can see through it there, I can then position it exactly where I want it on my board, and I know exactly where it's going to sit. So these are really, really useful for that. Of course, these are for lining the bottoms of your cake tins. But if you start with an image like this, you've traced it on here, you know it's going to fit that exactly. You know exactly where it is. So rather than having it onto a piece and then guessing where it's going to sit, when you transfer it on here, you know exactly where it needs to be. So these are really, really useful for that. Now, ideally, it's nice to have a little bit of a light box if you've got one. I don't have one. Often I will take my transfer to one of the windows I have here in my studio. Another cool trick that you can use is to actually use your iPhone and create a light box. So I've gone and got my iPhone here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my torch on so that it's up at its highest. So I've got my torch right here on its highest. And what I'm then going to do is just take a plastic container. I'm going to pop this up here and try not to blind you too much. I'm going to take a plastic container and pop that over the top. Then if I take my image, it does create a bit of a light box. So that's going to make it much easier now for me to transfer all of these image details onto my tracing paper. If you have got, of course, a container like this one that's got a little bit of divots and things in it, you can also just use, if you've got one of these cheap cutting boards, you can actually use this and create yourself a bit of a light diffuser with that as well. But you can absolutely just create your own little light box with a container and an iPhone. So I would move that around to make sure that I get all of that detail in there, and that's certainly what I'm going to do here. So what we might do is we'll use this one here, because then I can see exactly where it's going to go. Now, because my page is bigger than my transfer sheet, I am going to take some tape. I'm going to work out exactly where I want those faces to sit on my cake board. I'm actually just going to tape that to the base. That way, should I get a random come to my door, or you know, the need to go and make myself a cup of tea or something in the middle of this, then I can certainly go and do that and come back and not worry about losing my spot and getting all double lines. So that's a really nice way to make sure that it's nice and secure onto our sheet there. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create now the transfer that we're going to use. Now I'm using a graphite pencil here. I've had a previous discussion about graphite and cakes. I don't have an issue with using these. The amount that I actually transfer onto the cake is fairly negligible, and it's graphite, so it is non-toxic. There's probably worse things in a lot of the edible glitters and, well, non-edible, non-toxic glitters that we put on our cakes and things. So with these, of course, I don't have an issue with that. If you did have an issue using a graphite pencil, of course, you can use an edible marker. You will get a slightly different effect with the edible marker, and I find that that's quite difficult to do. But certainly if you have moral objections to using a non-toxic graphite pencil on your cakes, then certainly go ahead and use a edible marker. All right, and apologies again for my horrendously stained hands, but I can tell you that that Pokemon ball, I did come off second best. It didn't at all like what I was doing, but we will soldier on. We will get through. It's the life of a cake decorator. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my graphite pencil now, and I'm going to come around and mark in an outline. All right. So create this little template here. If you are a little nervous about transferring all of these images on and making sure that everything's in the right spot, spend some time at this point. It's a bit like the lid method when you're ganaching a cake, and that tediousness that you go through to set it all up. All of that work at the end all pays off. So this will be exactly the same. If you are nervous about any of the painting stages, spend a little bit more time, slow it down, and spend some time in here getting all of these details on. Even go as far, if you need to, as adjusting all of the contrast and darkness and highlights on your computer. So before you come to print, go into those printing settings, or if you've dragged your image into Word or wherever it is on your computer before you print it, adjust all those contrasting settings. What that'll do is the more you play with those settings, the more you'll see where your shadows are, where your highlights are, and even if you need to print a few different versions of that image out and mark in. I mean, even here, you can mark in here where you see the shadow. mark in there where there's a highlight. If you want to spend that time doing those, and that makes your life easier, you can see you've got nice contours and things on that face. That's going to make it a lot easier for you later on to see where you need to paint to. So you can create yourself almost a little paint by numbers.
So feel free to go ahead and do that on your computer. This is the way that I do it. So it may not be the way that works for you. I do say the way that works for you is the way that you feel most comfortable and the way that gives you the result that you want. So if you find that you've got a better way to get this image onto your cakeboard or your cake, then go with that. This is just the way that I do it. And certainly if I was painting this myself, I wouldn't have probably drawn in all of this extra detail. Usually what I do is I put dots where the eyes are, dots at the end of each eye, and mark where the nose is so that I can see and I can map that out a little bit easier. Alright, I'll come up here and make sure we get the horsehair line in here. This spunky spiky hair in there. Alright, down here onto his neck, and then his shirt. Okay, so that image you can see looks just like them. However, when you take it off your backing sheet, take that on very, very well. Alright, when you take it off your backing sheet, it starts to look nothing like them. So it's a good idea to just double check, make sure you've got all those details in there. If there's something that you're not quite sure of, get it right over the top of your lightbox. And have a look at it there. My image that I'm tracing from here is not very clear. So we will make this work. And hopefully, these boys will still talk to me when this is all done. Alright. We might get the obligatory cake flicks later in here too. So this is a good technique if you are doing a monogram or something like that. It's a really nice way to get fonts and things onto cakes without having to go and buy a gazillion set of cake toppers and covers. Alright.
So that's our little image there. I'm going to pull that off. If we pull it around this way, if you can see through the light there, we've got a nice little image there, a transfer, and that's going to be the start of our portrait painting. So I can get rid of my makeshift light box now. Turn that off, put that over there. And what I'll do is I'll bring my cake board in. There is a little bit of damage on here, but I am going to paint over the top of that and we're going to make it work. All right. So what I'm going to do now is pop this onto my cake board here. Now this cake board, as I said, was done yesterday, so it is dry. But what I am going to do is I'm going to now scribble over the top. It's kind of like when you're back in primary school and you did this in primary school. I'm sure you all did this, traced things over and then said, yeah, I totally drew it all on my own. Totally did. Same. If your fondant was a little bit wet, you could absolutely just come through here and scribe. So go over the top of the image this way and just go back over those lines, directly over those lines. That way you're not going to get scribble marks onto your cake. And if you aren't keen on using graphite, you can also just use that scribe method to scribe the outline straight onto your cake board or your cake. So what I've got here now is I have got a very light transfer there of my image, and that's given me a baseline now to come in and start painting. So this is going to be what we paint, and certainly if you wanted to spend, I don't know if you can see here on the camera, but there are these little contour lines that I drew on. So if you had gone in and drawn all of those contour lines, they will all be there for you to just basically paint by numbers. So what we'll do now is have a really quick little break, and then on the other side of that, we'll get painting into some faces. See you then.
Hi, I'm Zoe Byres. I'm from Sugar Art by Zoe Byres here in Brisbane, Australia, where I have my own little studio and I teach and do celebration cakes. Over the next few weeks I get to sugarcoat some things for you, and I'm very excited to be coming and showing you some sculpting and also some cake painting skills, which are two of my most favourite things. Thanks so much to Cakeflix TV for having me along. I'm very excited to be able to sugarcoat some things for you over the next few weeks. In the interim though, please feel free to say hi, pop into any of my socials and check out my website for more information. There's also some great templates and guides on there for you. I look forward to seeing you along.
Welcome back. We've already transferred our faces on, so now all we need to do is start laying in some colour. Before we go, actually, I just wanted to show you something. So I had noticed that I had missed out a big chunk of David's nose in here, but I'd already taken my paper off, so I wasn't sure whether I could line it. Although it's a perfect circle, I don't know that I could line it back up properly. So what I've done is I've come in and cut around the lines around his chin, and that way I can line that up with the lines that I have on my cake board here, back in here and retransfer, and then I've got his nose in there now as well. So now we are ready to paint. What we need to do is set up our equipment and get out what we need. So what I've got here is just your ordinary everyday oil burner. So these are the ones that we used to rock out with in the 90s. I'm sure you did with your essential oils. Same deal, you can pick these up at most cheap shops. If you can't get your hands on one of these, of course you can use a wheat pack that you pop in the back in your microwave for your back or your shoulders when they're sore. Those heat packs are great too. You can pop them in the microwave, get them really hot, pop your aluminium or your saucer or whatever on top of that. Remembering though, you will have to pop that back into the microwave intermittently to keep it warm. The beautiful thing about having a little tea light candle in the oil burner is that you do get a constant heat. So a bit like those table fondue sets that you have, same thing applies. Absolutely. And what I use is I have an aluminium paint palette. So these are really good because you can, of course, they conduct heat. So remembering though, they conduct heat. So don't go grabbing at them or rubbing them on yourself at the end, because they can get quite hot. And you can see that this one's got a bit burn marks on it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this on the top here. If you wanted to, you could absolutely just pop some cocoa butter straight into your dish here and paint from that. But I quite like the idea of the paint palette because then I can mix my colours. Right. So we're going to start off now with our oil burner. It's starting to get a little bit hot. I'm going to pop that just to the side so that I don't set the place on fire. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of cocoa butter. So I've got cocoa butter just in this little tin here. Yep, if I can open the lid. There we go. So this is just your natural cocoa butter. There's no colouring in this at all. It's just the natural colours of cocoa butter. So it does have a slight little yellow tinge because that's just the colour of the fat. Now I'm going a little bit crazy here and I'm putting far too much in, but that's what I do. I get a little bit excited. So I've put in quite a bit around. I might pop a little bit in the middle as well, just for fun. And that can be where I clean my brush off when I need to. All right, so we've got cocoa butter in that little paint palette. What I also have is I've discovered these Cake Craft cocoa butters, and they're actually cocoa butter that has pigment in it. So I have got a white here. I'm just gonna dig some of that out and pop some white into my paint palette. So it's a white cocoa butter, you can see that there. So it's already got a pigment added to it. And this one is a black. So this is a really nice one. I use quite a bit of this one. The good thing about having the black is that it's a really strong black pigment and you're not having to add a gazillion tons of dust into your cocoa butter to get it black when it's already very black. You can see that in there. All right, let's wipe off my paint. My little spatula, pop that to the side. Okay, so we're thinking colours. Now, always referring back to your original, I've got the original gorgeousness right here. I'm going to pop this to the side here, and this is what I'm going to use to refer to, rather than referring to the one that we used for transfer. I mean, first of all, this one's in black and white, but also because it's in mirror image. So unless you're incredibly insanely talented and you can read in reverse and see in reverse, always pop this one aside. Don't get confused by your mirror image. Go with the original one that you've got. So this is what we're going to go with today. Okay, so in terms of colours, what we're going to use is we're actually going to use petal dust. So I've got some petal dust here, which are my little magic colour petal dust that I use. And the one that I find is the best for skin colours is I tend to mix together the petal rouge and a little bit of ivory. So it depends on your skin tone as to what colours you're using. For example, if you're painting my face, you would not need very much colour at all because I'm pasty and white, pale. However, these boys have got some nice colour in their skin. So we'll make sure that we highlight some of that. So all I'm going to do is take some of these dusts and pop them into my little paint palette. Now my candle's struggling in there and I'm impatient, so I'm going to give them a little bit of a hurry along here with my lighty stick. Love the power of the fire stick there, getting that in there, get that melted. All right, so unlike the wee little rabbit that we painted the other day, this time we don't have any hard black lines. We don't have a big cartoony line around these chaps, so we can't actually start in with those hard lines. What we are going to do is we're going to start in with our softer outlines. So I'm going to come in here with the smallest amount, and like the when I was mixing the paint with the vodka the other day, I don't know if you can see, try not to burn myself, I'll bring this a little bit closer into shot here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the colour. I'm not going to go crazy and get in there and get it all combined. I'm going to just mix it so that there's parts here where there's an intense colour. I could tap right in there and get a really intense colour, and over here is a bit more of a diluted shade. So by doing that, it means that you get a few different shades in that one little pot there, that one little pot of the palette. All right, so I've got a little bit of colour now on my paintbrush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to follow around the shape of Paul's face here. You can see that's adding a little bit of cocoa butter and a little tiniest little bit of colour. All right. So I'm just blending that in just to add in a baseline for Paul's face there. All right, so we've got that face in there, and of course his neck and his chin. All right, so what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to have a look at this original picture here, and we're looking at these shading marks. So there is quite a line here. This is all shaded here. So we've got the light source, of course, is coming from this angle. So we want to paint in those shaded darker spaces first. Of course, like all things, we want to start light and gradually build those up. So I'm going to come back in here where I've got the lines here. I'm going to go around the base of his lips there. He's got gorgeous white teeth. We don't want to paint them pink at this point. All right, and the base of his nose, we want to come over here as well and go over those little pencil lines that we've got. Here on the side of his nose, there's also a little bit of shading here. You can see that. If I had painted in the contrast, I could, of course, just paint it in by numbers. There's another little mark here. All right, so that's a little bit dark. I'm going to come back in and dilute that a little bit. Beautiful thing about cocoa butter is you can continue to blend it as you need. All right, and then of course across here on his head and down here on the side of his face. So we can start to layer up some of these colours in here to make sure that we get the right shades in. We don't want to layer up the cocoa butter too much. You'll find that it'll become quite chunky and thick on there. We don't want to go with it too thick, but we do want to make sure that we get some pigment in here now. All right, so starting with the easy points, I'm going to start down on his neck and create a little bit of a shadow onto that board there. We can, of course, come in and shade these colours with a little bit of black. So black, of course, gives you a darker tint for a shadow. Go light on with black, but we do want to create a little bit of a shadow here on the side of his shirt. And of course there is quite a bit of shadow here from the light source on the other side. So we're going to come in here, make sure that we get his gorgeous cheeks in there. All right. So what we're doing is we're just putting base colours in at this point. We will come back and do some final details and some shading and things on later on. But again, I'm going in, there's a shadow here underneath his chin. I'm going to create that there. I don't know if you can, how well you can see that. The light in here is fading fast. The joys of winter. There is of course a shadow. You've got the shadow here from my paint palette, but I did want to show you how I mix those colours in here. All right, if I just pick it up on a little bit of an angle so I can see the shading and the colours in here a little bit more. And as of course this sets, this cocoa butter, it's quite cool in here, so it is setting quite quickly. That's quite set already. But the good thing, as I was saying about cocoa butter, is that I can come in here and I can rework it over and over again until I get what I want. So if I was painting this with a rose spirit, I certainly wouldn't be able to do that because it would dry, and once it's dry, it's done. So with cocoa butter, the good thing is that you can come in here and the heat just from the cocoa butter that you've got on your paintbrush is enough to melt what's underneath and to rework and to meld that all back in again. Starting to have a little bit of colour there in his face. You can see that there. So what we might do is move on now to David and do the same thing over this side. But I won't bore you through that detail, so I'll fast forward this bit for you. You can watch me see how fast I can paint. So we've got some base colours down. I'm not sure how strongly you can see that up on the screen. I'm hopeful that you can. It's fairly light. I am looking for something that is fairly light. I'm not going to go in here too hard this early. You can always build the colours up. So start light and come back and build up those colours. It's the best, absolutely the best way to do it. All right, so we have got our base colours and a little bit of shading done into our beautiful portrait of these gorgeous men. What we want to do now is come back after the break and fill in a little bit more detail. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for coming back. We've got a little bit more work to do, so let's get to it. I'm mixing a little bit of that Petal Rouge in with the lemon because I don't want them to look like they're jaundice. We just want to have a little bit of highlighting here. All right, so we're looking here for the highlights, and I'm going to now mark these in, and then that will be a point where I can blend in a moment. So I'm coming in here with a little bit of highlight. So across Paul's forehead here, he's got a little bit of light that hits his forehead. All right, so now I'm going to clean off my paintbrush here just a little bit. And to clean off your paintbrush when you're painting with cocoa butter, don't be dipping it into a glass of water or anything like that, because that of course is just going to solidify the fat and it's all going to end very badly for you. So what you want to do is have some clear cocoa butter, so just some natural cocoa butter, and all I'm doing there is just cleaning off my brush into that cocoa butter, and then just wiping that either onto a clean towel or into some paper towel, and that will then clean your paintbrush off. There's still a bit of cocoa fat in there, that's fine because we're going to keep painting on here now, but all of that pigment is gone. All right, so I am going to come back here now with a little bit more of this Petal Rouge, and we're going to blend in this a little bit more. So I'm going to take some of that natural colour as well, just dilute it down. And what I'm wanting to do now is be a little bit softer with my paintbrush. So I don't want to have these hard lines. What I'm doing now is I'm blending. So I'm using the heat from the cocoa butter to come back in over the top and blend out those highlights that we've just put in. I don't want them to be great big blobby lods of fat on their faces. I don't know whether I'd be invited back. So let's come back to Paul down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch out from my larger paintbrush. I'm going to swing in with a finer paintbrush now, because I'm going to start looking at some finer details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out this fine brush and I'm going to redefine some of these lines that have been lost in all of my excited blending. So this is all work that's just going over the top of my initial pencil lines, but you can see just by me coming back in and going over my initial pencil lines that now he's actually starting to look more like a face. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back in and work in some other tones into the face. So we've got a little bit of shading in here that we've done. We're going to come in and do a little bit more, but this time adding in a bit more of a skin tone just to shade in that part of Paul's face there. We want to make sure that we get all of that in there. A little bit of some brown into their faces, just to take the edge off a little bit of that pink. We don't want them to all look like they've got terribly high blood pressure. Working that brown in and referring back to my original. So all I'm doing with this tan is I'm using it as an opportunity to blend the pink, so the petal rouge that I used initially. I'm using it as an opportunity to blend that petal rouge back into where I've put those highlights. So you can see where I've got the highlight there and the petal rouge around it. And what I'm doing now is taking that tan and I'm using this as an opportunity to blend that back in. Alright, so I'm going to take my brown now and I'm going to come in here around Paul's eye. So I'm going to focus on this part of his eye here where we can see that we've got the point that it comes to here. So what I want to do is I want to bring it around on the top. So a fine, nice fine paintbrush. Bring it around on the top just like in the photo and bring it down to a point. And that's going to define that shape. Alright, so I want to bring up, I've got this, the bottom eyelid here, I've transferred that on so I can see where that starts and where it finishes. I'm going to do the same with the eye over here. I can see where I've painted previously, but what I'm going to do is take some of that brown again and define that top lid. Eye there, we've got a little bit of black in there. Didn't mean to do that, but that's okay, we'll shade it out. So we'll follow that lead then, we'll take a little bit more of the black and we'll come in here and we'll shade out some darker points in here. Now, in the corner of Paul's mouth here, we've got a little bit of black, so I'm going to come in now with my little bit of black just to add that into the corner of his mouth. I'm also then, while I've got black on my paintbrush here, going to very finely define that lid once more. And again on this side, so defining that eye and that shape there in the eye. Alright, so again we can come in now if we wish, if you're game, and come in and paint in these eyes in here. So I've got these where I've traced these in here from previously, so I can see where they start and where they finish. And I'm going to come in here and paint in some eyes. So I'm going to go around the edge of the eye first. Now again, I'm going to resist the urge to paint them all in black. So I'm going to deliberately leave a small little circle of white. I'm going to add a little bit of brown to my black here, just so that I've got a nice chocolatey, almost a dark chocolatey brown for his eyes. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to add another reflection in. So putting another circle and another circle. So the circles don't need to be the same size to add in reflections. You'll note when reflections are generally in eyes that they're not the same unless the light is right in front of them, and this is a professional photo, so these reflections are pretty consistent. But the majority of photos you'll notice that the reflection in the eye, depending on where the light is not consistent in both eyes. So you'll have one that'll be a little bit smaller and a little bit darker than the other. All right, so we've got some eyes in there as well. All right, so he's got teeth and eyes, but no other detail. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, again, back into my brown that I've mixed a slight little bit of black with just to get a little bit of a darker hue. I'm going to come back in here and redefine this shape a little bit more around his eyes, because you'll note that there is quite a dark line that does define this eye. Tap back into the black there if I need it as well. So if I need extra definition, I can always tap back into my black. Okay, so back in with my fine lines in here. I'm going to come back in with my darker colours and highlight some of these areas here, and then of course I'm going to come in and paint in some eyebrows. So eyebrows are funny things. Women's eyebrows in particular are a lot easier because they're generally very neat and tidy. Men's eyebrows tend to be a little bit bushier. They're a little bit uneven at times. They can be a little bit cray-cray. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow the line of the top of the eye, and we're going to add in very light little bit of shading in here. And you can see I'm just painting with tiniest little dots and strokes. Now, lips. We always get tempted to draw great big top lips, but you'll see when people smile is that their top lip sort of becomes a little bit more horizontal. So it's quite thin. So don't get tempted to add great big lips for top lips. For women or men, they do become a little bit narrower, of course, when we smile. So we don't want to add in great big collagen pouty numbers in here. We just want to follow the top of the lip that we have there already. And of course we're going to blend in this bottom lip as well. So bottom lip is of course a little bit larger. And I use the same colours as I'm using, especially for men, the same colours as I'm using for their skin tone. That then ensures that they don't look like they've got full lipstick on. We're just defining the shape and the different notes of the skin there. So I'm going to add a little bit of white in here as a bit of a highlight on lip, and we'll bring that around there. Now, teeth are funny things. You could sit in here now and paint in all of his teeth. I find to do that, you'll end up with almost like he's holding a corn cob in his mouth, and we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to come in here and just define some of the gum. So I'm not going to come in and paint a line and then all of his teeth in. He'll become very teethy, and it'll be too much. What I am going to do is just take a little bit of really light pink, and I'm going to just mark out some of those gum lines, because Paul does have a really lovely smile with these beautiful teeth. And by marking in just some of the gum lines, even if it's very, very light, that will be enough to show that he's actually smiling and that he has teeth. So I am going to come in and define a hairline here. So I have taken the pink pretty much all the way up to where the hair starts. And I am going to now just start to blend in some brown for some hair. Alright, so I'll come in here and I'm just wanting to add colour. I'm going to come back in and continue to add some fine details. So I'm going to add a little bit more extra shading down here along this part here. I don't know what I've done. Oh, okay, there's a collar in here. So we need to give Paul a nose here. He's distinctly lacking a nose. So all of that's going to be done with shading. So I'm going to bring in my pink, bring it up to the side here. Now he's got a line that comes down here on his face and around here like that. And some more pink down on this side, and really just going back in now and shading in, adding in extra details, which we couldn't necessarily have done before, But now that the eye's there and we have a bit more of a space for a nose, we can have a bit more of a play. All right, now we're going to talk hair. So we're going to come in here with some black into my brown to create a dark brown. Of course, I could come in with a chocolate or something as well. And I'm going to just stroke this hair into place. Okay, so I am adding in some black here, just to add a little bit of extra definition there. I am going to come back in and scratch at some of this in a moment. Actually, final details we can come in and scratch, but I did just want to add a little bit of hair. And I'm going to continue to add extra tones in, and I feel it's a little bit two-dimensional, so we need to add in a little bit more shading and a little bit more definition with the colour. So I'm going to go back over again where I was before and just make some of these areas a little bit darker, and that's going to help redefine some of this face here. I just feel that it's a little bit light on in the definition. So it's just a matter of working and reworking until you get what you're happy with. All right, so we've got one more little break and then we'll come back and finish off these faces. We're on the home stretch. We'll see you soon.